You don't do a thing. You're here to watch the kids, my daughter-in-law ordered me, meticulously filing her freshly painted nails. Those words plunged into my chest like frozen daggers. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you feel, even for a second, that this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep letting this all out. My name is Eleanor Hayes, but everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 68 years old, and for the last 4 years I've been living in my son Robert's house in the Pines, a suburb of Chicago. Every morning I wake up at 5:30, just as the sun barely touches the pitched roofs of our neighborhood. My wrinkled hands, crisscrossed with veins that look like maps of dry rivers, move mechanically in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for a family that sees me as part of the furniture. The blue apron I've worn for years smells of cheap detergent, and the tears I've shed in silence. It has grease stains that won't come out, just like the wounds on my soul that refuse to fade. In my pocket, I always carry a handkerchief embroidered for me by my late husband, Arthur, on our wedding day, 45 years ago. It's the only thing I have left of him, besides the memories and a bank account with a considerable fortune that no one in this house knows exists. Arthur worked all his life as an antique dealer on the Chicago circuit. He bought and sold rare items, invested in properties in neighborhoods like Logan Square when no one believed in them, and gradually accumulated a portfolio now worth over $2.5 million. When he passed away, he left me everything: the houses, the investments, the stock market shares, and even some savings in euros he kept for a rainy day, as he used to say. But I never told Robert or his wife, Tiffany. I thought it was better to keep it a secret until the right moment. How naive I was. This November morning, while stirring Robert's black coffee, the good porcelain mug that Tiffany reserves only for him and herself, I heard their footsteps coming down the stairs. Robert is 38, works at an insurance firm downtown, and ever since he married Tiffany 6 years ago, he seems to have forgotten I exist. He only speaks to me when he needs something: to watch the kids, to make dinner, or to clean up a mess they made. "Good morning, dear," I said with that forced smile I've perfected during these years of living together. He didn't even look up from his phone. Tiffany appeared moments later, her expensive heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She works as a retail associate on the Magnificent Mile, but she dresses like she owns the place. Her nails are always perfect, her hair always styled, her makeup always impeccable, and she always treats me like her maid. "Eleanor, the coffee is cold," she said without looking at me, checking Instagram on the most expensive phone I'd ever seen. "I'm so sorry, honey. I'll heat up a fresh cup right away. And please don't call me honey. I've told you 1,000 times." I swallowed. I hear that phrase every week, sometimes every day. Tiffany despises it when I try to create any kind of family connection with her. To her, I am Eleanor, the old woman living in her house for free, watching her children for free, cleaning for free, cooking for free, as if love were free, as if the years I dedicated to raising Robert were free, as if the sleepless nights when he was small and had a fever were free, as if all the money I've spent on this house over the last 4 years were free. Because yes, I've spent money. A lot of money. When I arrived, after Robert begged me to move in because "You'd be so lonely in your house, Mom," I thought contributing financially was the normal thing to do. I paid for the kitchen remodel, $20,000. I paid for Tiffany's new car, $25,000. I paid for the family vacation to Maui, $10,000. I paid the annual tuition for my grandchildren, Alex and Sophie, at their private school, $15,000 a year. It all came from my savings, from Arthur's inheritance, from the rents of the properties I have leased out in Logan Square. But I never told them. I never told them I had a significant estate, that I could live comfortably on my own, that I could even help them much more if they treated me with respect. I just wanted to feel loved. I just wanted to be part of the family. But this morning, while preparing lunch for my grandchildren, Alex and Sophie, 8 and 6 respectively, something changed forever. Tiffany descended the stairs like a queen approaching her throne, wearing a new dress that likely cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Eleanor, I need you to keep the kids all afternoon. I'm going shopping with my friends downtown." Of course, Tiffany. And you have to make dinner afterward. Robert is working late because of a meeting. Something nutritious, okay? Not like that watery soup you made yesterday. I nodded silently, stirring the mac and cheese on the stove. The steam rose to my face, mingling with the tears that were beginning to form in my eyes. Oh, and clean the upstairs bathroom well. It's disgusting, she added, reapplying lipstick in the hallway mirror. Yes, Tiff, and one more thing, she interrupted, turning to me with that cold look I'd learned to fear. I don't want you giving the kids so many sweets. They're getting chubby, and people will start thinking we don't know how to take care of them. That was the final straw. Tiffany, You don't do a thing, she yelled, with a violence I'd never seen from her. Watch the kids. That's what you're here for. That's why we support you. Support. That word echoed in my ears like a funeral bell. Support. As if I were a burden. As if I were a beggar living off their charity. As if I hadn't put a single dollar into that house. And clean the dining room table well, because my parents are coming tomorrow, and I don't want them seeing this mess, she continued, grabbing her Louis Vuitton purse, which I had bought her for her birthday. My hands trembled. The wooden spoon fell to the floor with a dry thud. I felt as if someone had emptied my chest, as if my heart had been scooped out with a cold spoon and thrown in the garbage. Tiffany left the house without saying goodbye, without a thank you, without even looking at me. The car, my car, the one I paid for, roared to life and drove away, leaving only the echo of her contempt. I was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of food I was cooking for a family that seemed to hate me. My grandchildren played in the living room, oblivious to the pain that had just pierced their grandmother's chest. The television played a rerun with canned laughter that contrasted brutally with the silence that had grown inside me. I sat down on the wooden chair by the window, the same chair where I used to sit with Arthur when he was alive, when I still had a home where I was loved. Through the glass, I saw the garden I had planted and cared for over the years, the rose bushes that bloomed every spring, the daisies Sophie picked for bouquets, the small orange tree that bore fruit every winter. I had done it all. I had paid for it all. I had cared for it all. And to them, I did nothing. In that moment, something inside me definitively broke. It wasn't just my heart, that had been cracked for a long time. It was my capacity to keep swallowing the humiliation, to keep pretending this was normal, to keep believing that if I gave more, they would love me more. It was my last day being invisible in my own life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake in my small attic room, the one that was formerly a storage closet, and which Robert converted into my space when I moved in. The walls are white and cold, with no proper heating, and in winter, the chill seeps in through the badly sealed window cracks. I have a twin bed that creaks every time I move, a tiny dresser where my 5 dresses and 2 coats barely fit, and a nightstand where I keep Arthur's photo and my mother-of-pearl rosary. From up here, I hear everything. I hear Robert coming home late and arguing with Tiffany in hushed tones. I hear the children crying at night when no one gets up to comfort them. I hear Tiffany on the phone with her friends, laughing about the old lady who lives in their house as if she were their maid. Because yes, I've heard her. One afternoon, while dusting the staircase, I overheard her phone conversation from the living room. "You wouldn't believe what I have to put up with, Christina," she was telling her friend. "The old lady won't stop interfering. Yesterday she told Alex he couldn't have so many cookies, can you believe it? Like she's his mother." "And what does Robert say?" asked the voice on the other end. "Robert's a softie. He says we have to be patient with her because she's old and lonely. But I didn't marry him to support a mother-in-law, you know. I have enough with the kids. Support a mother-in-law." Those words were burned into my memory like a red-hot iron. Support. As if I were a financial burden to them. As if I hadn't put a single dollar into everything in that house. But what hurt the most was hearing Robert that same night, when he thought I was asleep. "Tiffany, don't be so hard on my mother," he was saying while they brushed their teeth in their master bathroom. "Hard? Robert, your mother is taking advantage of us. She eats our food, uses our electricity, our water, and then she complains when we ask her to help with the kids. But she's my mother, and I'm your wife. You have to decide, Robert. Either you set boundaries with your mother or this is going to turn into hell." Robert didn't reply. The silence was worse than any words. My son, the baby I carried in my womb for 9 months, the child I cared for when he had pneumonia at 5, the teenager I supported when all his friends made fun of him for wearing glasses, the young man I helped financially so he could go to college. That man was unable to defend me. He was unable to tell his wife that I wasn't a burden, but his mother. But there was more, much more. During these 4 years, I've seen things a mother should never see. I've seen my son lie about working late to avoid coming home early. I've seen Tiffany check his phone every night, controlling every text, every call. I've seen them argue about money, even though they both have stable jobs. And I cover a large part of their expenses without them knowing. Because yes, I pay more than they think. When I arrived at this house, I opened a joint checking account with Robert to facilitate household expenses, as he told me. Every month, I transferred $1,500 to that account. Robert thought it was my widow's pension, but it was actually a small portion of the returns from my investments. Arthur had been very smart with money. He had shares in U.S. companies, investment funds abroad, and he had even bought some Bitcoin when no one knew what it was. All of that is now worth a fortune, but they don't know it. And over the years, I've watched them spend that money as if it were theirs. Tiffany bought new clothes every week. Robert changed cars twice. The children had every toy they asked for. Vacations were always at 5-star resorts. And I continued sleeping in the storage closet, eating the leftovers, wearing the clothes I'd had for years. The final straw came one December afternoon, a few weeks after the kitchen incident. I was at the park with Alex and Sophie, like every afternoon after school. The children played on the swings while I watched them from the bench, bundled up in my old wool coat that smelled of mothballs. It was cold, that damp Chicago cold that gets into your bones and stays there for days. Sophie came running up, her cheeks rosy from playing. "Grandma Ellie, why does Mom say you don't work?" The question pierced me like a spear. My 6-year-old granddaughter, with her angelic face and messy pigtails, looked at me with that innocent curiosity of children who don't understand the cruelty of adults. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "Yesterday, I heard Mom on the phone. She said you don't work, and that's why you have to watch us." "Is it true you don't work?" Alex joined the conversation, sitting on the bench beside me with his Chicago Cubs backpack. "Yeah, Grandma. And she also said you eat a lot and spend too much money on things you don't need." I felt as if a dagger had been twisted in my stomach. My own grandchildren, poisoned by their mother's words, were starting to see me as she did, as a burden, as someone who contributed nothing to the family. "My darlings," I told them, my voice trembling, "Grandma does work. I work by taking care of you, by cooking, cleaning, but that's not real work," Alex interrupted. "Real work is like Dad, who goes to an office. Or like Mom, who sells clothes. You just stay at home. You just stay at home." Those 4 words summarized everything my life had been during these years. I just stayed at home, as if being at home wasn't important, as if caring for a family wasn't a job, as if cooking, cleaning, educating, loving, protecting wasn't worth anything. That night, after putting the children to bed, preparing dinner, cleaning the kitchen, and ironing clothes for the next day, I went up to my room and started to think. I sat on my bed, holding Arthur's photo, and for the first time in years, I wondered what had become of Eleanor. What had become of the woman who married for love at 22? What had become of the mother who raised her son with sacrifice and love? What had become of the widow who had managed a considerable inheritance and multiplied it intelligently? I had become a shadow, an uncomfortable presence living in the attic of a house that no longer felt like mine, an unpaid maid working for room and board, like in the last century. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I had started to believe I was worthless, that I didn't deserve respect, that my only purpose in life was to serve others without expecting anything in return. I opened the drawer of my nightstand and took out the bank statement that had arrived that morning. My investments had performed exceptionally well that quarter. I had gained over $200,000 just in stock dividends. I had a liquid net worth of over $2.5 million, not counting the properties. I was rich. I was financially independent. I could live comfortably without depending on anyone for the rest of my life. And yet, I was there, in a tiny room, feeling like I was worth nothing. That night, I made a decision. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living like a beggar in a house I had helped pay for myself. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be treated as if I were invisible. The next day was Friday. Tiffany was going shopping with her friends, as she did every Friday. Robert would work late, as he did every Friday. The children would go to a classmate's birthday party after school. It would be the perfect day to start changing my life. For the first time in years, I fell asleep with a smile on my lips. Friday arrived like a blessing wrapped in routine. I woke up at 5:30, as always, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel the familiar weight of resignation on my shoulders. As I prepared Robert's coffee in the silent kitchen, my hands didn't tremble. As I cut the toast into perfect triangles, just the way Tiffany liked it, my mind was extraordinarily clear. I had slept soundly for the first time in months. I didn't wake up startled thinking about the next day's chores, nor did I stay awake reviewing every hurtful word I'd heard. It was as if something inside me had finally found its place. Robert came down at 7:15, with that perpetually tired look he'd developed in recent years. His dark circles were more pronounced, his hair was thinning at the crown, and he had that hunched posture of a man carrying more weight than he could bear. I felt sorry for him, but I also felt a strange emotional distance, as if I were observing him from the outside. "Morning, Mom," he murmured, without looking up from his phone. "Morning, dear." Tiffany appeared 20 minutes later, perfectly made up and dressed in a new outfit I immediately recognized. I had seen it in the window of Nordstrom the week before. It cost $150, more than I spent on clothes all year. "Eleanor, I need everything immaculate today," she said, pouring herself freshly squeezed orange juice. "My parents are coming for dinner tonight, and I want them to see that we know how to keep a house right." Her parents. The only grandparents my grandchildren really knew, because I had been relegated to the role of resident nanny. Mr. Sterling and Mrs. Beatrice Beaumont, who lived in a luxury condo in Greenwich, Connecticut, and always looked at this house with an air of superiority as if it were too small for their standards. They were treated with respect. They did get the master bedroom when they stayed overnight. They did receive the best cuts of prime rib and the good crystal glasses. "What would you like me to prepare for dinner?" I asked, maintaining the neutral tone I had perfected over the years. "Something elegant. Maybe beef Wellington, and buy good wine, none of that cheap boxed stuff you usually get." Cheap wine. I, who had a cellar worth over $50,000 in my Logan Square house, where I kept bottles Arthur had collected over decades, bottles of vintage Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than Tiffany's monthly salary. But here I bought $5 wine because it was what I could afford. "And one more thing," she added, checking her lipstick in her phone mirror. "My parents are sleeping here this weekend. They'll need your room." The world stopped for a second. "My room?" "Well, it's the only one with a queen bed besides ours. You can sleep on the living room sofa, right? It's just one night. The living room sofa." This woman wanted me, a 68-year-old woman with back problems, to sleep on the sofa so her parents could use my room, the room I had furnished, where I slept every night, where I kept my few personal belongings. "Tiffany, there's no discussion, Eleanor. It's decided." She cut me off, grabbing her purse. "Oh, and change the sheets to the good ones, the blue embroidered set. They're in the upstairs closet." The blue embroidered sheets. The ones I had bought for the guest bed we never had. The ones I had carefully stored for years, waiting for the special occasion that never came. Now they would be for Tiffany's parents, while I slept on the sofa like an indigent. Robert said nothing. As always, they both left that morning without saying goodbye, leaving behind the echo of their demands and the scent of Tiffany's expensive perfume. I took the children to school in silence, walking through the suburban streets I knew like the back of my hand. Alex and Sophie chatted among themselves about the birthday party they were going to that afternoon, oblivious to the emotional hurricane that had erupted inside me. When I returned home, the emptiness of the silence hit me like a slap. This house that had been my refuge for 4 years suddenly felt like a prison. Every object I saw reminded me of something I had paid for. The living room TV, the new washing machine, the dining room curtains, even the Persian rug in the entrance. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number of my bank manager, Edward Ed Miller, a man in his 50s who had known my financial situation since Arthur died. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. How can I assist you?" "Ed, I need to make some inquiries about my accounts." "One moment, please." I heard the clicking of the keyboard. "In checking accounts, you currently have $340,000. In short-term investment funds, another $200,000. And in the emergency savings account, $100,000. $640,000 immediately available. More money than Robert would earn in his entire working life. And the total value of my net worth, including the properties, stocks, investment funds, and business holdings. We're talking about approximately $2,400,000, Mrs. Hayes. $2,400,000. While I slept in an attic and was humiliated for eating their food. "Ed, I want to make some changes to my accounts." "What kind of changes?" "I want to close the joint account I have with my son. And I want all the money in it transferred to my personal account." "Are you sure, ma'am?" "That account has a quite substantial balance. Around $35,000. $35,000 they had accumulated over months without spending it. Money I had been religiously contributing every month for household expenses, and which they had been saving without telling me. Completely sure. And I want it done today." "Very well. Anything else?" "Yes. I want to know the status of the properties I have rented, especially the house on Logan Street. That property is generating a monthly income of $2,000, and the tenants have just renewed the lease for 2 more years. It's one of your most profitable investments. $2,000 a month just from that property. Enough to live comfortably anywhere in the country." "Ed, would it be possible for the tenants to terminate the lease? That is there a clause that allows me to reclaim the property?" "Let me check. Yes, there is a clause that allows termination with 3 months' notice if the owner needs the residence for personal use. You would have to compensate the tenants with 3 months' rent, but it's feasible." "Perfect. Please initiate the process. May I ask if you plan on moving, Mrs. Hayes?" For the first time in years, I smiled for real. "Let's just say I'm going home, Ed." After hanging up, I remained seated in that kitchen I had cleaned thousands of times, looking at the walls I had painted myself when I arrived, the tiles I had laid with my own hands. This house carried my sweat, my money, my love, but it never carried my name on any official paper. It was time to reclaim what was mine, starting with my dignity. I went up to my room, which would no longer be mine that night, and opened the dresser. In the back, wrapped in a plastic garment bag, was the dress I had worn the day I married Arthur. Navy blue, elegantly cut, with small mother-of-pearl buttons. I tried it on, and surprisingly, it still fit. That evening, when I picked up the children from the birthday party, when Tiffany returned from her shopping, when Robert came home from work, they would not find the same Eleanor who had left that morning. They were going to meet the woman I had been before I became their servant. At 6 in the evening, when I went to pick up Alex and Sophie from the party, something had changed in my walk. I was wearing the navy blue dress, my good leather shoes, the ones I saved for special occasions that never came, and I had styled my hair in a way I hadn't used in years. I had even put on a little lipstick, that coral shade that Arthur always said made me look younger. The other parents looked at me strangely. For 4 years, they had seen me arrive in the same worn clothes, the same tired hairstyle, the same expression of perpetual exhaustion. Now they saw a different woman, and I felt different too. "Grandma, why are you all dressed up?" Sophie asked me when we left the venue. "Because I felt like it, sweetheart." "Are you going somewhere special?" she insisted, taking my hand with that natural trust children have. "Maybe," I smiled. On the way home, we stopped at Kroger, but instead of buying the usual cheap store brands, I filled the cart with quality products. Prime-cut filet mignon instead of cheap ground beef, a Marquez de Riscal Rioja instead of the usual boxed wine, fresh jumbo shrimp, aged cheeses, extra virgin olive oil from Italy. Everything I had stopped buying for years to save money that I had never actually needed to save. When we got to the checkout, the cashier looked surprised. "Wow, Mrs. Hayes, you're treating yourself today," she commented kindly. She was a young girl who knew me by sight after so many years shopping there. It was about time, wasn't it? I replied, passing my debit card without looking at the total price. $180. More than I had spent on groceries in the last 2 months combined. But it was my money, my estate, my resources. It was time to remember what that meant. The children helped me carry the bags home, excited by the amount of good food we had bought. While they changed clothes and did homework in the living room, I began cooking the most elaborate beef Wellington I had made in years. Authentic mushroom duxelles, homemade stock, fresh herbs, premium tenderloin. The aroma that began to waft from the kitchen was that of real food, not the quick, cheap dinners I had become accustomed to. Robert arrived at 8, as usual on Fridays. I heard him park the car and come up the stairs with that tired step he had developed lately. When he walked into the kitchen and saw me, he froze in the doorway. "Mom, you're very elegant." "Thank you, son. Has something happened? Are you okay?" It was the first time in months Robert had asked me how I was. The first time he truly looked at me, as if he actually saw me instead of looking through me. "I'm perfectly fine, Robert. Better than I've been in a long time." Tiffany arrived 20 minutes later, loaded with bags from various expensive downtown stores. I heard her clicking her heels down the hallway, talking on the phone with one of her friends about some celebrity gossip. When she walked into the kitchen and saw me, her expression changed completely. "What are you doing dressed like that?" she asked with that suspicious tone she used when something didn't fit her version of reality. "Preparing dinner for your parents, as you requested." "But why are you so dressed up? You look, I don't know, different. Am I not allowed to dress up in my own home?" The word own sounded strange coming out of my mouth. I had gone so long without feeling this house was mine that uttering that word felt both liberating and terrifying. Tiffany narrowed her eyes, like a predator detecting that something in its territory has changed. "Eleanor, I hope you haven't spent a lot of money on dinner. You know we have to watch the expenses." Watch the expenses. While she returned home with bags from Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus, and Sephora that had probably cost more than my splurge at the supermarket. "Don't worry about the money, Tiffany." "What do you mean, don't worry?" "It's our money, Eleanor. This family's money. Our money. This family's money." I felt a strange calm invade me, like the stillness that precedes a storm. "Our money?" I repeated, without raising my voice. "Of course. Robert and I work to support this house. And you? Well, you contribute what you can with your pension." My pension. For 4 years, I had been transferring $1,500 monthly to the family account. $18,000 a year. $72,000 in total. Money that came from my investments, my properties, my personal estate. But to them, it was my pension, a pittance I contributed out of their charity. "Tiffany," I said, drying my hands on the apron, "we need to talk." "Talk about what?" "I have to get the house ready for my parents." "Did you change the sheets on your bed yet?" "My bed." As if it were a temporary favor they could withdraw whenever they wanted. "I changed the sheets," I confirmed. "But there is something you need to know about this family's money." Robert walked into the kitchen at that moment, likely drawn by the serious tone of my voice. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from one to the other. "Your mother is acting very strange today," Tiffany said. "First, she dresses up like she's going to a wedding. Then she spends a fortune on expensive food, and now she wants to lecture us about family finances." "I don't want to lecture," I clarified. "I want to clear up some misunderstandings." I pulled my phone from my apron pocket and found the screenshot I had taken that morning of my bank statement. "For these past 4 years," I began, my voice firm, "you have believed that I live off your charity, that I am a financial burden you endure out of kindness." "Mom," Robert began, uncomfortable. "Let me finish, son. It's important that you know the truth." I showed them the phone screen. The numbers were clear and incontestable. This is my real net worth. $2,400,000. Properties, investments, stocks, investment funds. All legal, all declared, all mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany's mouth dropped open, staring at the screen as if it were a mirage. Robert paled to the color of the wall. That's impossible," Tiffany murmured. "You don't have money. You live off your widow's pension." My widow's pension is $700 a month. The $1,500 I transfer to the family account every month comes from the returns on my investments. The dividends from my stocks alone give me more money per month than you earn at your job." The words floated in the air like unexploded bombs. Robert sat down heavily in a chair, running his hands over his face. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Because it shouldn't have been necessary. Because respect is not bought with money. Because I thought you loved me for who I am, not for what I have." Tiffany had regained her composure, but her face reflected a mixture of disbelief and something that looked like panic. "If you have that much money, why are you living here? Why don't you buy your own house?" "I have my own house. Several, in fact. One of them is on Logan Street with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a terrace, and park views. It's where I lived with Arthur for 20 years. Then why? Because when Robert asked me to come live here, I thought it was because he wanted me close. I thought you wanted me to be part of this family, but I've realized you only wanted a free maid." The doorbell rang just then. Tiffany's parents had arrived. "Eleanor," Tiffany said in a strange, almost pleading voice, "we can talk about this later. We have guests now." "Of course," I smiled. After all, I prepared a beautiful dinner, with my money, in my honor. And for the first time in years, it was I who walked out of the kitchen with my head held high, leaving them with their questions and their guilt. The night was going to be very interesting. Mr. Sterling and Mrs. Beatrice Beaumont entered the house as they always did, as if they were the owners and we were the guests. He, in his gray wool suit, and his air of a retired banker who had accumulated a considerable fortune during his years in the financial sector. She, wrapped in a cashmere coat and carrying that Hermes bag that cost over $5,000 and which she never missed an opportunity to mention. For 4 years, I had received these people with my head bowed, serving their drinks, taking their coats, setting the table with the good china while they settled into the living room as if it were their own home. Tiffany always transformed in their presence, becoming even more demanding of me to show that she knew how to manage the household help. But tonight was going to be different. When the bell rang, I was the one who opened the door. But instead of offering a silent bow and taking their coats, I greeted them with a serene smile and extended my hand. "Good evening, Mr. Beaumont, Mrs. Beaumont. Welcome." Mr. Beaumont automatically shook my hand, but his expression showed surprise. For 4 years, I had been little more than a piece of furniture moving through the house to him. Now, he truly saw me for the first time. "Eleanor, you look very elegant tonight," Mrs. Beaumont commented, evaluating me from head to toe with that gaze that women of her social class had perfected to detect imitations and counterfeits. "Thank you. I thought it was time to honor the occasion as it deserves." I led them to the wet bar where they kept the good bottles. "An aperitif? I have an 18-year-old Macallan I think you'll enjoy." Mr. Beaumont raised his eyebrows. The 18-year-old Macallan cost over $400 a bottle. It wasn't exactly the kind of whiskey he would expect to find in the home of an insurance employee and a retail associate. "Macallan?" he asked. "Well, that is unexpected. Refined tastes know no economic limitations," I replied, pouring 2 glasses with the precision of someone who had learned from Arthur, who collected fine whiskeys. Although, of course, having the resources to afford them helps. Tiffany shot me a look that could have melted ice. Her parents had no idea what had happened in the kitchen 30 minutes earlier, and she clearly didn't know how to handle the situation. During dinner, I maintained a conversation that surprised everyone present. Instead of serving in silence and disappearing into the kitchen as I had done for years, I sat at the table as a full member of the family. I talked about art when Mr. Beaumont mentioned an exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago. I commented on investments when Mrs. Beaumont bragged about the returns on her pension funds. I discussed the Chicago real estate market with knowledge. "Eleanor, I didn't know you were so current on investment matters," Mr. Beaumont commented, clearly intrigued. "Well, when one manages a considerable estate, it's necessary to stay informed," I replied, delicately cutting a piece of my prime-cut filet. "Tech stocks have been especially profitable this year, although I prefer to diversify with real estate and some Bitcoin." The silence that followed was eloquent. Mrs. Beaumont stopped chewing. Mr. Beaumont frowned. Robert choked on his wine. Tiffany paled to the color of the tablecloth. Considerable estate? Mrs. Beaumont asked with that sharp voice she used when something didn't fit her worldview. Yes. Approximately $2.5 million between properties, investments, and liquid assets, I replied, with the same casualness with which I would have commented on the weather. Mr. Beaumont, who had made money his entire life and recognized someone with real resources when he saw them, straightened up in his chair. $2.5 million? He repeated. Eleanor, I had no idea I always thought that I was a poor widow living off my son's charity. I completed with a smile. It's understandable. For 4 years, I have lived as if I were. Tiffany intervened with a strangled voice. Dad, Mom, Eleanor is exaggerating. She must have added wrong or— I am not exaggerating, I interrupted her. My late husband, Arthur, was very foresightful. He invested in properties when the market was down, bought shares in companies that are now worth a fortune, and even ventured into some cryptocurrency years ago. Everything is perfectly documented and audited by my manager at Chase Private Client. Mr. Beaumont, who had worked in banking all his life, nodded slowly. Chase Private Client doesn't accept customers with less than $1 million in assets. He murmured, more to himself than to the others. Exactly. Ed Miller has been my personal manager for 3 years. Mrs. Beaumont looked at her daughter with an expression I had never seen before. It was a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something that seemed almost respect. Tiffany, did you know this? No. Tiffany stammered like a child caught in a lie. Because if you knew Eleanor had resources and yet you had her, well, living like a maid, I completed, without malice but with absolute clarity. Sleeping in the storage closet converted into a room, eating the leftovers, working without pay in exchange for room and board. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mr. Beaumont looked at Robert with an expression that clearly said, "Explain yourself." Mrs. Beaumont watched Tiffany as if seeing her for the first time in her life. Robert, Mr. Beaumont finally said, "Did you not know any of this either? My poor son who had been trapped between his wife and his mother for years without knowing how to navigate those turbulent waters, ran his hands over his face. Dad, Mom never said, we thought that. You thought I was a burden, I said, that you were doing me a favor by supporting me, that I should be grateful for a roof over my head. Mrs. Beaumont addressed her daughter with a voice that brooked no nonsense. Tiffany, is that true? You had a woman with $2 million sleeping in the storage closet? She didn't tell us anything, Tiffany finally exploded. If she had that much money, why didn't she buy her own house? Why did she come here to live like what, Tiffany? Mrs. Beaumont asked in a dangerously low voice. Like a, say it, honey, I encouraged her. Like what? Tiffany couldn't complete the sentence, but we all knew what she had been about to say. Like a tramp, like a dependent, like a burden. Mr. Beaumont slowly rose from the table. Eleanor, he said with a formality he had never used with me, may I speak with you privately? We went to the living room balcony, leaving the others in a sepulchral silence. Mr. Beaumont lit one of his expensive cigars, and for a moment, only the noise of the traffic from the street below could be heard. Eleanor, he finally said, I am a businessman. I've seen a lot of money move during my career, and I've learned to recognize people who really have it versus those who only boast of having it. You have it. I nodded. What I don't understand, he continued, is why a woman with your estate submitted to living as you've lived these years. I looked toward the living room, where I could see the silhouettes of Robert and Tiffany talking in low voices with tense gestures. Because I thought love was more important than money, Mr. Beaumont. I thought a family was built with affection, not with financial transactions. And now? Now I've learned that some people only respect what they can quantify. And that's fine. I can play that game too. Mr. Beaumont nodded slowly, with a smile I hadn't seen before. It seems this dinner is going to be much more interesting than I anticipated. When we returned from the balcony, the tension in the dining room was palpable. Tiffany's eyes were red, and Robert seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. Mrs. Beaumont looked at her daughter with an expression I had never seen. deep disappointment mixed with secondhand embarrassment. "Well," Mr. Beaumont said, settling back into his chair with a new attitude of respect toward me, "I believe this conversation has taken a very revealing turn." He addressed Robert directly, with that authoritative voice he had used for decades to close major deals. "Robert, son, I think you have some serious issues to resolve with your mother." "Dad, I didn't know," Robert started. "Didn't know what? That your mother had assets? Or didn't you know you were treating her like a servant?" Robert was left speechless. Mrs. Beaumont, who had remained silent since our revelation, finally spoke. "Tiffany, for 4 years, every time we've come here, you've talked about Eleanor as if she were a burden. The mother-in-law we have to support, the old lady who keeps interfering, the one who eats our food without contributing anything. Mom, Don't interrupt me." Mrs. Beaumont's voice resonated through the house. "Do you know what that says about you? Do you know how we feel? Who have been silent witnesses to how you treated a woman who turns out to have more money than all of us combined?" It was true, even adding up the estates of Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, who lived comfortably on their pensions and savings. They didn't reach the $2.5 million that I had, and they knew it. "Eleanor," Mrs. Beaumont continued, addressing me, "I owe you an apology. For years I have been a silent witness to how my daughter treated you, and I never intervened because I assumed, you assumed I was what I appeared to be," I completed. "A poor, dependent widow. It's understandable." "No, it's not understandable," she insisted. "Respect should not depend on the money one has. An older person deserves dignity regardless of their financial situation." Tiffany exploded. "This is ridiculous," she yelled, standing up so abruptly that she knocked over her wine glass. "If Eleanor had that much money, why didn't she tell us from the start? Why did she play the victim? Why did she let us think we were helping her?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children who were watching television in the living room seemed to have fallen silent. "Played the victim?" I repeated slowly. "Tiffany, do you really think I faked 4 years of humiliation for what, exactly? To make us feel guilty, to manipulate us?" Mr. Beaumont stood up with an expression that would have terrified any employee of his former bank. "Tiffany, stop. Stop right now." "Dad, you don't understand. She lied to us for 4 years. She made us look like monsters when we were helping her." "Helping?" My voice came out colder than I intended. "Were you helping me when you ordered me to watch your children while you went shopping? Were you helping me when you forbade me to call you honey? Were you helping me when you kicked me out of my room to sleep on the sofa?" Tiffany walked toward me with an aggressiveness she had never shown in front of her parents. "You chose to come here. No one forced you. If you didn't like how we treated you, you could have left." "You're right," I said, standing up too. "I could have left. And in fact, that is exactly what I am going to do." Silence fell over the table once again like a slab. "What?" Robert murmured. "I'm leaving, son. Tonight has been very revealing for all of us. I have discovered that love cannot be bought, but it also cannot be given away to those who don't value it. And you have discovered that you have been mistreating someone who could have made your life much easier if you had treated her with a minimum of respect." "Mom, wait!" Robert approached me. "We can fix this. We can talk. We can what, Robert? Pretend the last 4 years didn't happen? Act as if you suddenly respect me because you're afraid of losing access to my money? It's not that, Mom. I love you." Those words hurt more than all of Tiffany's humiliations combined. Because there was a part of me that wanted to believe them. There was a part of me that was still the mother who had raised that child with unconditional love. "Robert," I said softly, "if you loved me, you wouldn't have allowed me to be treated the way I was. If you loved me, you would have defended my dignity regardless of how much money I had in the bank. But I didn't know that." "Exactly. You didn't know I had money, and that's why you allowed me to be humiliated. Because you thought I had no options, that I had to put up with anything because I depended on you." Robert started to cry. My adult son, 38 years old, cried like the child he had been. "Forgive me, Mom. Please forgive me." Mrs. Beaumont approached Tiffany, who was still standing by the table with a defiant expression. "Tiffany, you are going to apologize to Eleanor. Right now." "I am not going to apologize for anything. I didn't do anything wrong. If she wanted respect, she should have been honest from the beginning. Mr. Beaumont headed for the door. Beatrice, we're leaving. I can't stay in this house for another minute. Dad, wait! Tiffany ran after him. You can't leave like this. It's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Mr. Beaumont turned around. Tiffany, for 4 years, you've made me complicit in mistreating a millionaire woman. Do you know how ridiculous that makes me feel? Do you know the shame I feel right now? But Dad, no buts. Eleanor, he addressed me, if you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call me. And I deeply regret being a silent witness to this situation. Mrs. Beaumont took my hands. Eleanor, dear, I hope someday you can forgive this family, especially me for not intervening sooner. It's already forgiven, I replied. You didn't have to know the truth. I chose not to tell it. After Tiffany's parents left, the house fell into a sepulchral silence. Robert was still sitting at the table, his head in his hands. Tiffany had disappeared, likely locked in her room. The children had fallen asleep on the living room sofa. I took off the apron I had worn during dinner and carefully folded it on the kitchen counter. Then I went up to my room, for the last time, to pack my things. I didn't have much to take. 4 years of living as a temporary guest don't leave many possessions. I put my clothes in the suitcase I had brought when I arrived, packed Arthur's photo, my rosary, and the few personal items I had accumulated. When I came downstairs with the suitcase, Robert was waiting for me in the hallway. Mom, please, don't leave like this. We can fix this. Robert, son, there is nothing to fix. This had to happen. I'd been living a lie for years, pretending to be someone I wasn't, accepting treatment I didn't deserve. It was time for both you and I to face reality. What about the kids? They love you, and I love them. But children need to learn that true love doesn't include humiliation or disrespect. Maybe, when they are older, they will understand why their grandmother had to leave. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool Chicago night air. My taxi was already waiting. Where are you going? Robert shouted from the doorway. Home, I replied. I'm going home. And for the first time in 4 years, those words sounded true. The taxi glided through the streets of Chicago toward Logan Square, as if it were a ship sailing to a safe harbor. As I watched the city lights pass by the window, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The anticipation of arriving home, not to a place where I was tolerated, not to a space where I had to earn my right to exist every day, but to my home, to the place where Arthur and I had been happy, where every corner held memories of true love. The house on Logan Street welcomed me with the comforting silence of spaces that belonged to us. The tenants had taken good care of the property over the years, but I could still immediately recognize the traces of my former life. The stair railing Arthur had varnished 3 times until he got the perfect shade. The foyer tiles we had chosen together at an antique store, the vaguely familiar scent of lavender that seemed ingrained in the walls. That first night, I slept in the queen bed that had been ours for 20 years. The sheets were new, courtesy of the tenants, but the mattress retained the shape of our bodies, the indentation where Arthur would curl up to read the Chicago Tribune on Sunday mornings, the side where I woke up every day feeling loved and valued. For the first time in 4 years, I slept 8 hours straight. The next day, my process of reconquest began. Not of revenge, that word implied a bitterness I no longer felt, but of recovering the woman I had been before I became the silent shadow of the pines. The first thing I did was call Mary Ann, my lifelong hairdresser, who had a small but elegant salon near the Gold Coast. Ellie, she cried out when she saw me walk in. My dear, where have you been all these years? Lost, Mary Ann, but I'm back now. I spent 3 hours in that salon. Cut, color to cover the gray I had let grow for years of neglect, a facial treatment, a manicure. When I left, I felt as if I had recovered 10 years of my life. The mirror reflected the image of Eleanor Hayes, not the invisible grandmother I had been for so long. Then I went shopping. Not to Kroger, but to Saks Fifth Avenue, where for years I hadn't set foot because it was too expensive for my budget. I tried on dresses that flattered my figure, comfortable but elegant shoes, a wool coat that cost more than I had spent on clothes in the last 2 years. While the sales associate, a kind young woman, helped me choose, she asked, "Is this for a special occasion?" "Yes," I replied. For the rest of my life. That afternoon, settled on my home's patio with a cup of authentic Earl Grey tea and a pastry from a gourmet bakery, I called Ed, my bank manager. Mrs. Hayes, how did the move go? Perfectly, Ed. I want to make some changes to my investments. Tell me. I want to withdraw my money from all the conservative funds and bet on something riskier but more profitable. I'm 68, but I feel like my life has just begun. Ed laughed on the other end of the phone. That's an attitude I like to hear. Have you thought about technology investments? Artificial intelligence company stocks are experiencing extraordinary growth. How much would I need for a diversified portfolio? With $500,000, we could create a very solid portfolio. Between tech stocks, some additional Bitcoin, and stakes in venture capital funds. Let's do it. Over the following weeks, my life took a rhythm I had never known. I woke up when my body told me I had rested enough. I ate breakfast on the patio reading the entire newspaper, not just the headlines I managed to see while preparing breakfast for others. I had lunch in restaurants I previously thought I couldn't afford. I strolled through Lincoln Park feeding the ducks, something I had wanted to do for years but never had the time for. But the most important thing was the silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of someone waiting for orders or reproaches, but the chosen silence, the mental space to think about myself, to remember who I had been before becoming the professional caretaker for a family that didn't value my sacrifices. A month after leaving Robert's house, he started calling me. At first, I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail while I continued my activities. Painting classes at a studio in the River North neighborhood, where I discovered I had a certain talent for landscapes. Dinners with Hope, a friend from my youth I had reconnected with, who confessed she always thought I had vanished after moving in with Robert. You just stopped being you, she told me one afternoon while we were having wine on the patio of a Wicker Park bar. Before, you were Ellie, the woman with opinions, with humor, with her own life, and suddenly you became Robert's mother, Tiffany's mother-in-law, as if you ceased to exist as an individual person. She was right. For 4 years, I had been defined exclusively by my relationship with others. I wasn't Eleanor the intelligent widow who had known how to multiply her husband's inheritance. I wasn't Eleanor the woman who read historical novels and knew about art. I wasn't Eleanor who made Arthur laugh with her impressions of talk show hosts. I was just the grandmother's servant burden. Finally, after 2 weeks of missed calls, I decided to answer Robert. Hello, son. Mom, you finally answered. I was so worried. You don't need to worry. I'm perfectly fine. Mom, we need to talk. Things have really changed since you left. Oh, really? How have they changed? Tiffany and we've been talking about everything that happened, about how we treated you. I waited. I had learned the value of silence. Mom, we realize we made mistakes. Big mistakes. Mistakes? I repeated. Yes. We shouldn't have. I shouldn't have allowed you to be treated the way we did, regardless of how much money you had or didn't have. Go on. Tiffany wants to apologize to you. The children miss you. I miss you. Robert, the fact that you now know I have money doesn't change 4 years of humiliations. I know, Mom, but we want to make it up to you. We want you to come back, but this time as you deserve. You would have your own room. Better yet, you'd have the whole upstairs floor to yourself. And you wouldn't have to do any housework, no childcare. Just be our mother and grandmother. The offer was tempting, I have to admit. There was a part of me that missed Alex and Sophie's hugs, that missed being part of a family, even if that family had mistreated me. And is Tiffany on board with that? Yes. Well, she's learning. Her parents told her some very harsh things about how she treated you. Mr. Beaumont even said he might cut ties with her if she didn't fix things with you. There it was. The real reason. It wasn't that they had had a moral revelation about respect and dignity. It was that the social consequences of their behavior had caught up to them. Tiffany's parents, with their own social status to protect, couldn't afford to be associated with people who mistreated millionaire elderly women. Robert, do you know the difference between a sincere apology and a convenient one? What do you mean? A sincere apology comes from genuine regret. A convenient apology comes from fear of the consequences. Mom, I really am sorry. Maybe so, son. but I need time to distinguish between your regret and your fear of losing access to my inheritance. The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. It's not about the money, Mom, isn't it? Then accept that I will only return when I am sure you love me for being Eleanor, not for having $2 million. And when will that be? I don't know, Robert, but for the first time in years, I have all the time in the world to decide. 6 months after that dinner that changed everything, I was sitting on the patio of my Logan Square house, watching the golden sunset stretch over the Chicago skyline. In my hands, I had a glass of California Zinfandel from a vintage Arthur would have appreciated, and on the table rested the latest statement of my investments. My tech stocks had yielded 30%, my Bitcoin had doubled its value, and the estate I had inherited from Arthur was now nearing $3 million. But more important than the figures was what I saw in the mirror every morning, a woman who had recovered not only her dignity, but her joy for living. That morning, I had received an unexpected call. Not from Robert, who kept trying to convince me every 2 weeks to come home on any terms I wanted. Not from Tiffany, who, according to Robert, was working on herself to be a better person. The call was from Alex, my 8-year-old grandson. Grandma Ellie, why don't you come home? His little voice reached my soul in a way Robert's pleas never had. Sweetheart, Grandma lives in her own house now, but I miss you, and Sophie does too. Dad says you got mad at us. I didn't get mad at you, my love. Grandparents sometimes need to live in their own homes to be happy. But can you come visit us? Mom says you're really rich now, and that's why you don't want to come. Those words hurt more than Tiffany could ever have imagined. Even now, months later, she was still poisoning my grandchildren with her distorted version of reality. To her, my absence had nothing to do with dignity or respect, but with money and arrogance. Alex, Grandma is going to come see you very soon, but it's going to be different. Different how? You'll see, sweetheart. That afternoon, I made a decision I had been mulling over for weeks. I called Robert. Mom, it's great to hear from you. Robert, I want to see you, but not at your house. At mine. Of course, Mom. When? Tomorrow at 5. And I want you to come alone. No Tiffany, no children, just you. The next day, Robert appeared at my door with a bouquet of flowers and a nervous expression I hadn't seen on him since he was a teenager. He was wearing a new suit, he had cut his hair, and he had the demeanor of someone who knew they were being evaluated. Mom, your house is beautiful, he said, looking around with genuine admiration. And it was. Over these months, I had recovered not only my physical space, but my personal taste. I had restored the furniture Arthur and I had bought together, hung the paintings I liked, filled the house with plants, books, and music. It was, once again, my home. Sit down, Robert. We have a lot to talk about. I served him coffee in the good china, the Wedgwood porcelain I had saved for years for special occasions, and which I now used every day because I had learned that life itself was special occasion enough. Mom, before you say anything, I want you to know that I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. I'm glad to hear that. I've been going to therapy. Tiffany and I, together and separately. That surprised me. Robert had never believed in psychological therapy. And what have you discovered? That I was a coward. That I let my wife mistreat my mother because it was easier than facing the conflict. That I confused keeping the peace with betraying the person I should have protected the most. The words sounded rehearsed, but there was something in his eyes that told me he meant them. And Tiffany? What has she discovered? Robert sighed deeply. Tiffany has discovered that she grew up in a family where love was earned by competing, where a person's worth was measured by their utility. Her parents always compared her to others, always made her feel like she had to prove herself. That explains her behavior, Robert, but it doesn't justify it. I know. She knows it too. That's why she's in individual therapy, working on her control patterns and defense mechanisms. And the children miss you desperately. Alex asks about you every night. Sophie has started drawing houses with 2 grandmas, one who lives with them, and one who lives far away but loves them very much. That broke my heart and repaired it at the same time. Robert, do you know why I haven't returned to your house in these 6 months? Because we're learning to value you. No. It's because I needed to learn to value myself. For 4 years, I allowed myself to be mistreated because I thought it was better to be mistreated than to be alone. I learned that I was wrong. Robert nodded slowly. Is there any chance we can be a family again, Mom? Robert, we never stopped being family. But healthy families have boundaries. They have mutual respect. They have love that isn't based on utility. What would have to change? Everything and nothing. Robert looked confused. I have changed, son. I am no longer the woman desperate to be loved who accepts any crumb of affection. I am Eleanor Hayes, a 68-year-old woman with a considerable estate, with my own interests, with a full life. If you want me to be part of yours, it's going to be on my terms. What are your terms? First, respect. I will not tolerate orders, shouting, or condescending treatment. Second, reciprocity. If I contribute love and time to this family, I expect to receive the same. Third, honesty. No pretending the last 4 years didn't happen, or that everything is automatically forgiven. Robert nodded at each point. And a fourth? There is no fourth. I just need to know that you love me for being Eleanor, not for having money, not for being useful, not for social convenience. We love you for being Eleanor, Mom, for being our Eleanor. 6 months later, I was at a family dinner again, but this time, things were different. Tiffany served me food with genuine respect, asking if I needed anything else. Robert consulted me on important family decisions. The children ran to hug me when I arrived, not because I was their free caretaker, but because I was their grandmother who loved them. And I had my own house to return to every night. The transformation hadn't been immediate or perfect. There were relapses, moments when Tiffany reverted to her old patterns, and I had to remind her firmly but without cruelty what the boundaries were. There were times when Robert tried to use my affection to avoid difficult conversations, and I had to insist that true love included uncomfortable honesty. But there were also beautiful moments. Alex came with me to my painting class and discovered he had a talent for drawing. Sophie helped me plant a garden on my patio and learned the names of all the flowers. Robert and I had adult-to-adult conversations, without the mother-son dependent dynamic that had dominated our relationship for years. And Tiffany, slowly, began to show the woman she could have been if she had grown up feeling valued for who she was instead of what she did. One spring afternoon, while we were having coffee on my patio after a family meal, Tiffany told me something I never thought I would hear. Eleanor, thank you for not giving up on us. What do you mean? You could have left forever. With all the money you have, you could have moved anywhere in the world and never seen us again. But you chose to give us a second chance. Tiffany, families aren't investments that you divest from when they don't perform. They are long-term commitments that require constant work, like your stocks and your properties. I laughed. Exactly. And also, like your stocks and your properties, they yield better returns when managed with intelligence and patience. That night, when I returned to my Logan Square house, I sat on the same patio where my rebirth had begun 6 months earlier. In my hands, I had a letter I had started writing many times but never finished. A letter to Arthur. My dearest Arthur, I finally learned the lesson you tried to teach me during our 20 years of marriage. That true love does not diminish when you respect yourself. That being generous does not mean being subservient. That having money is not the most important thing in life, but knowing your own worth is. I became the woman you always knew I could be. And now, when our grandchildren ask me what I learned in these years, I will tell them that the most valuable inheritance is not the dollars in the bank, but the dignity we must never give away. I finished my glass of wine, put the letter in the drawer next to all the others I had written to him over the years, and smiled, looking at the stars over Chicago. I had learned that sometimes, to find a family that values you, you first have to be willing to lose it. And now, have you ever lived through something similar? Or do you know someone who had to choose between dignity and family love? Tell me in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like and subscribe to the channel so this message can reach someone who really needs to hear it.